The truth most will never acknowledge is that strategic thinking, the ability to see 10 moves ahead while others struggle with their next step, is what truly shapes our world. This capacity wasn't granted at birth to a select few. It's cultivated through specific mental techniques refined over centuries. Have you ever wondered why some people seem untouchable by chaos, unmoved by manipulation, and unshaken by challenges that cripple others? What if I told you the difference isn't luck, resources, or connections, but a specific mental configuration that anyone can develop? Think about it. In a world obsessed with external power, money, influence, status, we've overlooked the foundation that makes all other forms of power possible, the mind. The most formidable individuals throughout history weren't necessarily the strongest or wealthiest, but those who mastered their mental landscape first. Has this ever happened to you? You're in a high-pressure situation, perhaps a negotiation, confrontation, or critical decision point, and you feel your thoughts scrambling, emotions rising, and clarity dissolving just when you need it most. That mental fog isn't coincidence, it's programming that keeps most people in reactive modes their entire lives. What makes Machiavelli's insights so powerful isn't his cynicism, but his recognition that true power begins and ends with mental sovereignty. When you cannot be controlled mentally, you become untouchable, not through force or intimidation, but through pure cognitive advantage. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share isn't another motivational framework that evaporates under pressure. This is a systematic approach to mental conditioning that transforms how your brain processes challenges, anticipates outcomes, and maintains focus when everything around you descends into chaos. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Intelligence is unique among power sources. It cannot be stolen, confiscated, or diminished by external circumstances. While fortunes collapse overnight and influence fades, a strategically developed mind remains unassailable. You either cultivate this resource deliberately or remain vulnerable to those who did. What you're about to discover might surprise you, the exact mental conditioning system that separates those who control circumstances from those controlled by them. This isn't about academic intelligence or processing speed, but about developing an unshakable cognitive framework that functions with precision under conditions that paralyze ordinary thinking. The mental trick I'm sharing today reshapes how you approach every challenge, conversation, and decision. It's the difference between feeling overwhelmed by complexity and seeing clear patterns others miss entirely, between reacting emotionally to provocations and responding strategically to opportunities disguised as problems. Now, imagine possessing a mental clarity so refined that manipulation becomes transparent to you. Distractions lose their power, and pressure situations actually enhance your performance rather than degrade it. This isn't hypothetical. It's precisely what happens when you apply Machiavelli's forgotten law of mental power to your daily cognitive practices. The reality most people never confront is that their minds have been systematically programmed for weakness. This isn't coincidental. It's the inevitable result of a lifetime spent chasing comfort, avoiding necessary pressure, and surrendering to an endless stream of distractions. Look around and you'll see the evidence everywhere. People scrolling mindlessly through social media while complaining about lack of time, avoiding difficult conversations while wondering why nothing changes, consuming endless content without producing value of their own. This mental conditioning creates a profound transformation in how the brain processes challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as opportunities for growth, the weakened mind perceives them as threats to be avoided. The hidden truth is that this reactivity trap keeps even intelligent, capable individuals stuck in perpetual loops of frustration and stagnation. The journey toward mental sovereignty begins with acknowledging this programming and making a deliberate decision to rewire your neural architecture. This is where cognitive edge conditioning enters as the systematic approach that transforms your ordinary thinking patterns into strategic weapons of perception and influence. Unlike superficial mindset techniques that collapse under real pressure, this conditioning works at a fundamental level, literally reshaping how your brain processes information, anticipates outcomes, and maintains clarity in chaos. The revelations that emerge from this practice aren't merely intellectual. They create an entirely new relationship with your environment. Imagine walking into a room and instantly reading subtle behavioral cues others miss completely. Picture yourself in a negotiation where you can predict the other party's position 3 moves ahead. Consider the impact of maintaining perfect focus while competitors become distracted and emotional. These aren't hypothetical scenarios, they're the natural results of deliberate cognitive conditioning. The most profound transformation occurs at the precise moment your mind gains mastery over your emotional responses. This isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about elevating your decision-making above the turbulence of momentary reactions. When someone attempts to manipulate you through fear, flattery, or frustration, your conditioned mind observes these tactics with detached curiosity rather than emotional engagement. Behind the scenes of every truly powerful individual is this same pivotal shift, the transition from being controlled by circumstances to controlling them, from reacting to ruling. This represents the fundamental difference between those who remain pawns in others' games and those who design the rules themselves. The intelligence I'm describing isn't measured by academic credentials or IQ scores. It's demonstrated through consistent strategic action, the ability to remain unreadable while reading others perfectly, and the capacity to convert pressure into performance while others crumble under the same conditions. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining the specific mental frameworks that make this transformation possible. The first involves creating deliberate cognitive tension, the systematic exposure to calibrated pressure that strengthens neural connections the same way physical resistance builds muscle. Without this essential component, the mind remains soft, predictable, and easily manipulated by stronger strategic thinkers. Drop in the comments, "My mind is my power," if you're starting to see how this approach could transform your own mental landscape. The essence of cognitive mastery goes far beyond mere information acquisition. We've been conditioned to believe that intelligence is simply a collection of facts. But this fundamental misunderstanding keeps most people trapped in perpetual mediocrity. True, intelligence manifests as foresight, the ability to pierce through emotional reactions and societal illusions to grasp the underlying architecture of reality itself. This revelation transforms how you perceive every interaction. Where others see random events, you begin recognizing patterns. Where they react to surface behaviors, you understand the deeper motivations driving those actions. This level of perception doesn't come from academic credentials or intellectual theory. It emerges from deliberate practice in observing human nature without judgment or emotional interference. Consider the profound difference between someone who merely knows chess rules versus a grandmaster who sees 15 moves ahead. The rules are identical, but the perception is worlds apart. In the same way, the cognitively conditioned mind moves through social dynamics, professional challenges, and personal relationships with this same strategic precision, always perceiving multiple moves ahead, while others remain fixated on their immediate reactions. The hidden truth is that when you understand how people think, their predictable triggers, habitual responses, and unconscious motivations, you navigate life's complexities like a chess master among casual players, not through manipulation, but through superior pattern recognition and strategic positioning. This creates an unassailable advantage in negotiations, leadership, and any situation requiring tactical awareness. If you're committed to developing this level of mental mastery, subscribe to join our community of strategic thinkers. This channel is dedicated to providing you with powerful cognitive frameworks that most will never discover on their own. Perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of this journey is that authentic power operates silently. Those most desperate to appear powerful, through loud declarations, aggressive posturing, or constant self-promotion, are revealing their fundamental weakness. True power functions through careful observation, calculated movement, and intentional timing. It doesn't need validation because its effectiveness speaks through results, not rhetoric. Behind the scenes, the cognitively elite practice the discipline of observation without judgment. They watch how people interact, notice subtle inconsistencies between words and behaviors, and catalog patterns that reveal underlying truths. This deliberate practice becomes a transformative mindset, one that allows them to predict outcomes without needing to control others directly. Consider how differently you'd approach conversations, negotiations, or conflicts if you could detach from emotional triggers and observe interactions as systems rather than personal attacks. The impact of this perceptual shift cannot be overstated. It transforms previously threatening situations into fascinating strategic exercises where you maintain complete cognitive command. Machiavelli understood this profoundly. That power doesn't come from forcing others to comply, but from understanding human nature so thoroughly that you can predict and position yourself advantageously in any circumstance. This revelatory approach means you no longer need to control others directly. You simply understand the game better than they do. Let's examine how this manifests in practical scenarios. When tensions rise in high-stakes environments, most people become reactive, defensive, and emotionally compromised. Their decision-making deteriorates precisely when clarity is most crucial, but the cognitively conditioned mind operates differently, remaining calm, perceptive, and strategically focused regardless of external pressure. If you're starting to see the world through this strategic lens, type "I see the patterns" in the comments below. Perhaps the most powerful transformation in this cognitive journey occurs when you develop immunity to emotional manipulation. Consider how often people are controlled through their desperate need for validation. Flattery becomes the invisible chain that binds them to manipulators. Or how quickly an insult can derail someone's rational thinking, sending them into reactive patterns that serve others' agendas. The superior mind operates differently. It seeks accuracy and truth rather than emotional validation. This mental sovereignty creates a profound shift in how you experience interactions. Compliments no longer cloud your judgment. Criticism doesn't trigger defensive reactions. Attempts to manipulate your emotions through guilt, shame, or flattery become transparent tactics you observe with detached curiosity rather than emotional engagement. Behind the scenes, this immunity to manipulation isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about choosing which emotions serve your strategic objectives rather than being controlled by them. Another revelation in this journey comes through transforming how you process failure. Where ordinary minds experience criticism, mistakes, and betrayals as emotional wounds, the strategically conditioned intellect converts these same experiences into valuable data points. Each setback becomes a tactical lesson that refines your understanding and strengthens your strategic position. This mindset shift completely reconstructs your relationship with adversity. Imagine encountering a significant failure and immediately asking, "What does this reveal about my blind spots? What pattern did I miss? How can I integrate this information to strengthen my position?" The hidden truth is that this analytical approach to setbacks creates an accelerated learning curve that outpaces competitors who remain trapped in emotional reactions to their failures. You literally transform obstacles into strategic assets. The ultimate manifestation of cognitive mastery emerges when your predictive abilities reach a level where very little surprises you anymore. This isn't about becoming cynical. It's about developing such refined pattern recognition that you anticipate movements before they occur. Every decision becomes deliberate, every silence carries strategic meaning, and the reactions of others follow predictable trajectories you've observed countless times before. This predictive capacity creates what appears almost supernatural to others. The ability to position yourself advantageously before opportunities become obvious, to avoid traps before they materialize, and to navigate complex situations with a clarity that seems impossible amid chaos. The impact of this ability cannot be overstated. It makes you essentially untouchable through superior awareness rather than defensive barriers. Consider how differently you would approach challenges if you could accurately predict the most likely outcomes of different approaches. The anxiety that paralyzes most people would dissolve into strategic clarity. The fear of uncertainty would transform into curiosity about which of your predictions will manifest. This mental framework completely reconstructs your relationship with risk, opportunity, and decision-making. Let's explore how this predictive intelligence operates in practical scenarios. When entering negotiations, the cognitively conditioned mind has already mapped the most probable positions, objections, and leverage points of all parties involved. While others react to each development with surprise, you've already prepared multiple response pathways based on predictable human behavior patterns. This creates an unshakable confidence that comes not from blind optimism, but from strategic foresight. If this approach to transforming challenges into strategic opportunities resonates with you, drop "I remain untouchable" in the comments below. The most profound strategic advantage emerges in how the cognitively conditioned mind moves through situations. Quiet, yet decisively effective, like a shadow. This isn't about dominating conversations or forcing your perspective. Quite the opposite. It's about understanding timing, perception, and psychological principles so thoroughly that you can guide interactions without excessive talking, redirect conflicts without direct confrontation, and gain genuine influence without resorting to force or manipulation. The transformation happens subtly. You begin noticing how strategic silence creates space that others feel compelled to fill, often revealing more than they intended. You develop the discipline to ask precisely, calibrated questions that guide conversations toward productive outcomes rather than emotional escalations. Behind the scenes, you're orchestrating meaningful exchanges while others remain unaware of your deliberate approach. This subtle influence becomes your signature. People simply find themselves naturally aligning with your position through what feels like their own discovery process. Perhaps the most revolutionary mindset shift occurs when you begin perceiving life not as a game with fixed rules, but as systems you can redesign. Most people remain perpetually trapped playing by established parameters, competing according to expectations, following conventional paths, and accepting artificial limitations as reality. The cognitively elite understand a profound hidden truth. When you comprehend how systems, people, and incentives truly function, you stop merely playing the game and start designing it. This revelation changes everything. Suddenly, constraints that seemed immovable become flexible. Problems that appeared unsolvable reveal alternative pathways. Career trajectories that seemed predetermined open to creative redirection. The impact of this perspective shift cannot be overstated. It's the difference between being a participant in someone else's design versus becoming the architect of your own circumstances. This doesn't require formal authority. It emerges from superior understanding of how things actually work beneath surface appearances. The IT foundation supporting this entire journey is the disciplined development of self-control and heightened awareness. Consider the decisive advantage gained when your mind pauses thoughtfully while others panic reflexively, analyzes systematically while others react emotionally, and acts precisely when timing is optimal rather than when impulse demands. This cognitive mastery represents the ultimate competitive edge in any domain, the ability to see opportunity with intention when others see only threat, to maintain perfect calm amid chaos when others become disoriented. This mental discipline doesn't develop accidentally. It emerges through deliberate practice in controlling attention, managing emotional responses, and cultivating present-moment awareness under increasing pressure. The journey involves training your perception to notice subtleties others miss completely, micro-expressions that reveal hidden intentions, inconsistencies between stated positions and actual behaviors, emerging patterns before they become obvious to the mainstream. Consider how differently you would experience challenges if you could maintain perfect clarity, precisely when clarity is most valuable, during high-pressure decisions, tense negotiations, or unexpected crises. The disciplined mind doesn't lose focus when stakes increase. Instead, it enters a state of heightened performance exactly when others become compromised by stress. This creates an extraordinary advantage in any competitive environment. Let's examine how this self-control manifests in practical scenarios. When faced with provocation, the untrained mind reacts instantly, often creating unnecessary conflict and revealing strategic weaknesses. The disciplined intellect operates differently. It pauses momentarily to assess multiple response options, considers second and third-order consequences, and chooses the optimal pathway rather than the most emotionally satisfying one. If you've experienced moments where maintaining calm clarity completely transformed a challenging situation, type "I choose clarity" in the comments below. Subscribe to continue this journey toward mental sovereignty with me. I share these advanced strategic concepts exclusively with this community, focusing on practical techniques you can apply immediately in your daily life. A profound distinction emerges when you observe how differently strategic thinkers approach challenges compared to reactive minds. The fool speaks merely to be heard, seeking validation, attention, or emotional release. The strategically conditioned intellect speaks deliberately to direct outcomes. Every word, every silence, and every question serves a specific purpose in shaping the environment. This fundamental difference separates those who design circumstances from those perpetually reacting to them. This revelation transforms how you engage with obstacles. Rather than seeing challenges as external forces happening to you, you begin recognizing how skilled minds actually architect situations that create strategic advantage. Behind the scenes, this means you stop playing defense against threats and start designing conditions where you hold positional superiority before conflicts even materialize. The impact of this perspective shift completely reconstructs your relationship with adversity. Consider how this manifests in practical scenarios. When facing competition, the reactive mind scrambles to match visible moves, while the strategic intellect quietly establishes leverage points that aren't immediately obvious, but prove decisive later. When addressing problems, the ordinary approach attacks symptoms, while the Machiavellian strategist addresses underlying systems that generate those symptoms. This proactive positioning represents the ultimate competitive edge in any domain. Perhaps the most critical understanding in this journey is that every single choice you make either strengthens or weakens your cognitive power. Your mental kingdom requires vigilant protection and consistent fortification. It is either growing stronger through deliberate challenge or deteriorating through neglect. There is no neutral state. Each word you speak, each decision you execute, each emotional reaction you permit is either enhancing or diminishing your strategic capacity. This mindset creates an extraordinary level of intentionality about how you invest your mental energy. You begin recognizing that indulging in pointless arguments, consuming low-quality information, and surrounding yourself with unfocused minds directly compromises your cognitive edge. The hidden truth is that mental sovereignty demands the same disciplined protection that physical health or financial wealth require, daily strengthening through deliberate practice. The journey towards strategic intelligence requires embracing Machiavelli's most profound insight, that intelligence isn't about idealistic virtue, but about practical survival wisdom. In a world filled with complexity, uncertainty, and genuine threats, those who survive and thrive aren't necessarily the most morally perfect, but the most strategically wise. This isn't cynicism. It's pragmatic recognition that navigating reality effectively requires seeing it clearly, rather than how we wish it might be. This perspective creates a fundamental shift in how you approach challenges. Instead of asking, "What should ideally happen here?" the strategic mind asks, "What is most likely to happen here, and how can I position advantageously within that reality?" The transformation in decision quality that emerges from this pragmatic clarity cannot be overstated. It grounds your choices in actual patterns of human behavior rather than wishful thinking about how people should behave. The most powerful revelation in this journey is that those who think most deeply tend to survive longest. The disciplined development of cognitive edge creates compounding advantages across every domain of life: professional advancement, relationship dynamics, financial decision-making, and personal resilience all flourish under strategic intelligence. This explains why, throughout history, the most enduring figures weren't merely lucky. They possess superior capacity to anticipate, adapt, and position themselves advantageously amid changing circumstances. If you've noticed how certain people consistently navigate challenges more effectively than others, type strategic intelligence in the comments below. Now I want to introduce you to the systematic framework that transforms these principles into practical reality, what I call cognitive edge conditioning. This isn't another vague self-improvement concept. It's a precisely calibrated six-phase system designed to sharpen your mind under pressure, enhance predictive capabilities, and develop the mental agility needed to dominate any situation you encounter. The beauty of this approach lies in its structured progression. Each phase builds upon the previous, creating compounding advantages that ordinary thinking simply cannot match. The journey begins with perhaps the most counterintuitive step: deliberately creating cognitive tension in your life. This revelation challenges everything modern culture teaches about comfort and ease. The hidden truth is that comfort is the silent assassin of brilliance. When your mind exists in a perpetually comfortable state, it has no evolutionary pressure to develop stronger neural pathways, faster processing, or strategic clarity. The transformation begins when you systematically engineer pressure into your daily environment. Behind the scenes, this deliberate resistance works similar to physical training. Just as muscles grow stronger through calculated stress, your neural circuitry develops enhanced capabilities through strategic challenge. This isn't about creating random difficulty or unnecessary struggle. It's about calibrated pressure that forces adaptation without overwhelming your system. The revelations that emerge from this practice often surprise even the most intelligent individuals. Capacities you never knew you possessed suddenly become accessible. Consider how differently your brain would function if you deliberately sought out conversations with people who challenge your assumptions rather than reinforce them. Imagine the neural pathways developed through consistently placing yourself in situations that demand your complete focus, rather than allowing perpetual distraction. Picture the mental architecture constructed through regularly engaging with complex problems that have no obvious solutions, rather than defaulting to comfortable routines. The most powerful aspect of creating cognitive tension is how it fundamentally reshapes your relationship with challenge itself. Where ordinary minds perceive difficulty as something to avoid, the strategically conditioned intellect recognizes it as the essential catalyst for growth. This mindset shift creates an extraordinary advantage. You begin actively seeking problems without easy answers, recognizing that the most valuable growth always happens at the edge of your capabilities. This principle extends beyond intellectual pursuits into every domain of life. In conversations, you deliberately seek perspectives that expose blind spots rather than complements that simply validate existing views. In professional contexts, you volunteer for projects that stretch your capabilities rather than those that merely showcase current strengths. In personal development, you consistently place yourself at the edge of your comfort zone, recognizing that meaningful expansion happens nowhere else. The impact of this approach becomes evident through the development of mental resilience that ordinary thinking cannot match. When faced with genuine crisis, the mind conditioned through deliberate cognitive tension remains clear and focused, while untrained minds scatter in panic. This creates an insurmountable advantage in any competitive environment. The ability to maintain strategic clarity precisely when clarity delivers the greatest leverage. The journey toward cognitive mastery begins with this fundamental question. Are you deliberately engineering pressure that forces mental adaptation, or are you unconsciously seeking comfort that guarantees stagnation? There is no neutral option. Your mind is either growing stronger through strategic challenge or weakening through unnecessary protection. If you're ready to embrace cognitive tension as the catalyst for extraordinary mental development, type "I choose growth through pressure" in the comments below. The strategic application of cognitive tension extends beyond merely seeking difficulty. It involves deliberately engineering novelty into your environment to create what neuroscientists call beneficial micro-injuries in your neural architecture. This revolutionary approach to mental development works similar to physical training. When you change routines, learn complex skills, or engage with challenging ideas, you're essentially creating controlled stress on your neural pathways. As these pathways rebuild, they form stronger connections, enhanced capabilities, and unprecedented mental flexibility. Behind the scenes of every transformative breakthrough is this same pattern. The mind encounters novelty that disrupts comfortable patterns, experiences temporary disorientation, then rebuilds with greater capacity. Consider how differently your cognitive landscape would evolve if you deliberately sought novel challenges every week. Learning a language with complex grammar, tackling mathematical concepts outside your comfort zone, or engaging with philosophical frameworks that challenge your existing worldview. Each of these experiences creates beneficial tension that forces adaptation and expansion. The hidden truth most people never discover is that cognitive tension without structured reflection remains merely noise, stressful but not strategically valuable. The revelation occurs when you develop disciplined practices to convert pressure into insight through systematic reflection. After each challenging experience, capture what surprised you, document emotional triggers that compromised clarity, map recurring mistakes, and extract specific tactical adjustments that enhance future performance. This reflective discipline transforms random difficulty into strategic advantage, creating a feedback loop where every challenge becomes a catalyst for improvement rather than merely an unpleasant experience. The journey toward cognitive mastery accelerates dramatically when you maintain detailed records of patterns, insights, and adjustments. These become your personal strategic playbook, a continuously refined resource that guides your development with unprecedented precision. Perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of this journey involves deliberately creating rituals that simulate crisis conditions to develop unshakable clarity under pressure. This principle reflects Machiavelli's profound understanding that those who practice difficult scenarios in controlled environments develop extraordinary capacity to maintain strategic focus when genuine challenges emerge. The mindset shift happens when you stop avoiding pressure and start systematically seeking it as a developmental tool. Consider incorporating practices like brief cold exposure to sharpen breath control and focus, meditation specifically designed to notice the first flicker of panic and consciously choose response patterns, timed problem-solving sessions that deliberately compress decision windows, and strategic social challenges that develop unreadability under observation. Each of these rituals creates a controlled environment where you can develop specific cognitive capacities without the high stakes of actual crisis. The transformation occurs as these simulated challenges become increasingly automatic. Your brain develops neural pathways specifically optimized for high performance under pressure. The impact becomes evident when you encounter genuine crisis situations and discover you maintain perfect clarity while others around you descend into reactivity and confusion. This creates an insurmountable advantage in negotiations, leadership, and any competitive environment. Let's examine how this principle manifests in practical scenarios. On days when facing important decisions, the untrained mind becomes anxious and scattered under pressure, often making impulsive choices to escape discomfort. The strategically conditioned intellect responds differently. Pressure actually enhances performance, creating hyperfocus and accelerated pattern recognition that produces superior outcomes. If you've experienced moments where pressure surprisingly brought out your best performance rather than compromising it, type "pressure reveals my strength" in the comments below. A critical revelation in this journey involves understanding that growth requires discomfort, but never collapse. The strategic approach to cognitive development involves carefully monitoring your limits while consistently expanding your capacity. This balance creates sustainable transformation rather than temporary breakthroughs followed by burnout. When you notice signs of genuine overwhelm, decreased performance, compromised recovery, or persistent anxiety, the solution isn't abandoning challenge, but recalibrating its application. Reduce volume temporarily while increasing precision of the challenges you maintain. This calibrated approach to cognitive development creates an extraordinary progression. Over time, your capacity to hold tension itself becomes a strategic resource. Where others become overwhelmed by complexity, ambiguity, or pressure, you develop the ability to maintain perfect clarity precisely when clarity delivers the greatest advantage. Behind the scenes, this expanding capacity manifests as a profound competitive edge in any domain requiring performance under pressure, negotiations, leadership, crisis management, or any high-stakes decision environment. Now, I want to explore the second phase of cognitive mastery, developing predictive thinking that allows you to operate above chaos rather than within it. This represents perhaps the most powerful revelation in the entire journey. That prediction itself is the true currency of power. Those who can foresee the movements of people, events, and circumstances with reasonable accuracy operate in an entirely different strategic dimension, positioned above the confusion that consumes ordinary minds, untouched by the chaos that disrupts conventional thinking. The transformation begins with recognizing that human behavior, despite its apparent complexity, follows remarkably predictable patterns when observed systematically. The mindset shift occurs when you stop perceiving people's reactions as random or purely individualistic and start recognizing the recurring patterns that govern behavior across personalities, cultures, and contexts. This doesn't require manipulative intent. It simply represents a more accurate understanding of how humans actually function. Consider developing a disciplined practice of observing repeated reactions in specific scenarios, recognizing habitual choice patterns in yourself and others, and tracking the emotional triggers that consistently drive predictable decisions. The hidden truth most never discover is that by recording these patterns objectively, without judgment or emotional interference, you develop an increasingly accurate predictive model of human behavior that allows you to anticipate responses before they occur. This systematic study creates an unparalleled strategic advantage. The ability to position yourself advantageously before situations develop rather than scrambling to respond after. They emerge. The impact of this predictive capability transforms how you experience challenging interactions. Negotiations become strategic chess matches where you anticipate multiple moves ahead. Potential conflicts are redirected before escalating into actual problems, and opportunities are seized before becoming obvious to competitors. The journey toward predictive mastery involves viewing human behavior through the lens of pattern recognition rather than moral judgment or emotional reaction. When someone behaves in ways that surprise or disappoint others, the strategically conditioned mind immediately asks, "What pattern does this fit? What similar situations have I observed? What emotional triggers might be driving this response?" This analytical approach creates extraordinary clarity where others experience confusion. If you've noticed that certain people or situations follow predictable patterns that others seem blind to, type "I recognize the patterns" in the comments below. The predictive advantage deepens significantly when you develop the discipline of mental simulation, deliberately rehearsing potential scenarios before physically encountering them. This practice transforms how your mind processes real-time interactions. By mentally walking through conversations, anticipating likely objections, and preparing strategic responses in advance, you train your perceptual system to detect subtle signals that most people completely miss. Micro-expressions that flicker across faces, almost imperceptible shifts in vocal tone, and telling hesitations that reveal underlying intentions. Behind the scenes of every masterful negotiator, leader, or strategist is this same revelatory practice. They've already experienced the interaction mentally before engaging physically. The transformation this creates cannot be overstated. You enter situations with a profound perceptual advantage, noticing nuances that signal important shifts well before they become obvious to others. Your mind becomes attuned to the subtle architecture beneath surface communications. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of developing predictive thinking involves training your perception to identify early signals where others perceive only random noise. The journey toward strategic intelligence requires recognizing that minor changes in tone, routine alterations, or shifts in response timing aren't meaningless variations. They're early indicators of significant pattern changes that haven't fully materialized yet. This perceptual refinement creates extraordinary advantage in any competitive domain. Consider maintaining detailed records of consequences that follow specific behavioral patterns, both your own and others. This disciplined documentation allows you to continuously refine your prediction models, creating increasingly accurate forecasts of how situations will likely unfold. The hidden truth most people never discover is that prediction isn't mystical intuition, but the result of systematic pattern recognition applied with disciplined objectivity. The most challenging yet essential aspect of mastering prediction involves deliberately detaching your forecasting from emotional desires. This represents the pinnacle of cognitive discipline, recognizing that you cannot accurately predict outcomes when fear or desire distorts your perception. The mindset shift occurs when you develop the capacity for neutral observation, seeing situations, people, and developments precisely as they are, rather than as you hope or fear they might be. This emotional discipline creates a profound strategic advantage. While others project their desires onto reality, compromising their predictive accuracy, you maintain clear perception that allows for superior positioning. Consider how differently you would approach challenges if your perception remained completely undistorted by emotional bias, recognizing genuine opportunities others miss through fear, while avoiding obvious traps others stumble into through desire. The development of this neutral observation capacity doesn't mean becoming emotionless, quite the opposite. It means gaining the freedom to choose your emotional responses strategically, rather than having them compromised by predictive distortion. This represents perhaps the most liberating revelation in the entire journey. Emotional discipline creates freedom rather than restriction. Let's examine how this principle manifests in practical scenarios. When evaluating potential investments, the emotionally undisciplined mind sees what it hopes to see, overlooking obvious warning signals because desire clouds perception. The strategically disciplined mind approaches the same opportunity with neutral observation, accurately assessing both potential and risk, because perception remains undistorted by emotional attachment to specific outcomes. If you've noticed how emotional attachment to specific outcomes has compromised your ability to see situations clearly in the past, type "I choose neutral perception" in the comments below. The true power of predictive thinking emerges when this practice becomes so ingrained that your brain automatically begins modeling scenarios without conscious effort. This represents a profound neurological transformation. Through consistent practice, your mind develops specialized neural pathways dedicated to anticipating outcomes, weighing probabilities, and prioritizing actions with extraordinary efficiency. The revelatory shift occurs when this process becomes automatic rather than requiring deliberate focus. Consider how differently you would approach challenges if your brain constantly generated potential scenarios, calculated likely outcomes, and prepared optimal responses as an unconscious background process. This automatic modeling creates an unassailable intelligence advantage. You're perpetually positioned several moves ahead, while others remain fixated on immediate circumstances. Behind the scenes, this represents the same cognitive edge that separates master chess players from novices, the ability to perceive multiple future states simultaneously without strain. Now, I want to explore the third phase in developing cognitive mastery, cultivating mental agility that allows you to overcome rigid thinking patterns that trap conventional minds. This represents perhaps the most transformative capability in the entire journey, developing a mind that bends without breaking, adapting fluidly to changing circumstances while maintaining strategic coherence. The profound advantage this creates becomes evident when confronting situations where rigid thinkers inevitably fail. The journey toward mental agility begins with recognizing how profoundly limiting conventional thinking patterns actually are. Most people operate through fixed mental frameworks that severely restrict their perception of possibilities. They see single solutions where multiple pathways exist, perceive dead ends where alternative routes are available, and experience paralysis when facing novel challenges that don't fit familiar patterns. The mindset shift occurs when you deliberately cultivate the capacity to shift perspectives instantly, perceiving multiple potential approaches simultaneously. Consider deliberately exposing yourself to scenarios that demand rapid evaluation and flexible thinking, complex problems with incomplete information that force innovative approaches, debates that challenge core assumptions you've never questioned, and tasks requiring simultaneous focus on multiple variables that can't be reduced to linear processes. Each of these experiences creates beneficial cognitive tension that expands your mental range. The hidden truth behind extraordinary strategic thinking isn't simply intelligence in the conventional sense. It's the capacity to maintain mental flexibility under conditions that cause others to become rigid and reactive. This agility allows you to adapt seamlessly to changing circumstances, pivot strategies without hesitation when new information emerges, and maintain strategic coherence even while adjusting tactical approaches. This mental flexibility represents a decisive competitive advantage in any rapidly changing environment. Business landscapes transforming through technological disruption, social dynamics shifting through cultural evolution, or personal challenges emerging through unexpected life developments. The cognitively agile mind doesn't resist these changes or become paralyzed by them. It flows with them, constantly identifying new strategic possibilities where others perceive only threat and disruption. If you've experienced moments where sudden flexibility in your thinking created breakthroughs in seemingly impossible situations, type "mental agility creates opportunity" in the comments below. Perhaps the most powerful revelation in developing mental agility is understanding that true flexibility isn't the same as indecision or inconsistency. Many people mistakenly believe that strategic coherence requires rigid adherence to a single approach. The hidden truth is precisely the opposite. Genuine strategic mastery involves the capacity to pivot without hesitation when circumstances change, discard outdated patterns when they no longer serve, and improvise elegant solutions under intense pressure while maintaining perfect alignment with your core objectives. Behind the scenes of every transformative breakthrough is this same pattern: the ability to adapt tactics fluidly without compromising strategic integrity. Consider how differently you would navigate complex challenges if you could instantly adjust your approach when new information emerges without experiencing the psychological friction that paralyzes conventional thinking. This transformation creates extraordinary leverage in negotiation, leadership, and any domain requiring adaptation to rapidly changing circumstances. One of the most practical disciplines for developing this agility involves deliberately reframing challenges from multiple perspectives. When facing any obstacle, train your mind to immediately identify alternative pathways that others completely miss. Question: assume solutions that everyone takes for granted. Consider what would happen if you reversed standard approaches entirely. The revelation occurs when you develop the capacity to hold several possible strategies simultaneously, weighing their relative advantages without becoming prematurely committed to any single approach. This practice of strategic reframing creates a decisive advantage. Where others see only one or two potential solutions, your mind generates 5 or 6 viable alternatives, dramatically increasing your probability of finding optimal pathways forward. The journey toward cognitive mastery accelerates dramatically when you make this practice deliberate rather than occasional, consistently asking, What alternative approach exists that no one else sees when addressing any significant challenge? The most overlooked aspect of developing mental agility involves cultivating emotional fluidity alongside intellectual flexibility. This represents perhaps the most profound mindset shift in the entire journey, developing the capacity to detach from frustration, disappointment, and rigid adherence to single plans when circumstances change. The hidden truth most never discover is that emotional reactions like anger or disappointment when plans fail aren't inherent. They're conditioned responses that can be transformed through deliberate practice. Consider developing the discipline to perceive emotional reactions simply as data points for adjustment rather than drivers of decision-making. When plans encounter obstacles, ordinary minds become emotionally invested in their original approach, often persisting despite obvious evidence it's no longer optimal. The strategically agile mind operates differently. Emotional attachment to specific methods dissolves instantly when better alternatives emerge, creating frictionless transitions where others experience disruptive resistance. This emotional fluidity creates an extraordinary competitive advantage. The ability to adapt instantly to changing circumstances without the performance-degrading effects of frustration, disappointment, or stubborn attachment to outdated approaches. Behind the scenes, this represents the same transformation that separates master improvisers from rigid performers. The capacity to flow with emerging conditions rather than fighting against them. If you've noticed how emotional attachment to specific approaches has sometimes prevented you from seeing better alternatives when circumstances changed, type "I choose strategic fluidity" in the comments below. Now, I want to explore the fourth phase in our cognitive mastery journey, dominating through strategic unpredictability. This represents perhaps Machiavelli's most profound insight, that predictable behavior creates fundamental vulnerability in any competitive environment. When others can anticipate your moves with reasonable accuracy, they gain significant leverage over your outcomes. The transformation begins when you deliberately train yourself to act without revealing underlying motives, change behavioral patterns strategically, and cultivate a presence that fundamentally resists anticipation. Consider the profound advantage created when others cannot predict your next move with confidence. They're forced into perpetual reaction rather than proactive positioning. Behind the scenes, this unpredictability isn't random chaos, but calculated variability, altering routines deliberately, switching methodologies strategically, and rotating approaches systematically so that no one can map your patterns with accuracy. The revelations that emerge from this practice often surprise. Even highly intelligent competitors, they find themselves consistently wrong-footed despite careful observation. This principle extends beyond major decisions into subtle behavioral patterns, varying communication styles, modulating response timing, and occasionally revealing seemingly predictable behavior to establish false patterns before pivotal shifts. The hidden truth most never discover is that unpredictability itself becomes a protective shield. Manipulation attempts fail, control, strategies collapse, and competitive advantages dissolve when applied against a target whose movements cannot be accurately anticipated. The fifth phase represents perhaps the most powerful lever of influence, harnessing emotional intelligence as the hidden engine of outcomes. While ordinary minds attempt to influence through force, charm, or rhetoric, the strategically developed intellect understands a profound reality, that controlling the emotional currents beneath the surface creates far more powerful leverage than any visible technique. This journey begins with developing acute self-awareness, recognizing your own emotional impulses before they manifest externally, detecting the first flicker of frustration, fear, or desire, and transforming them into strategic signals rather than reactive forces. This same perceptual refinement extends to observing others with unprecedented clarity, noticing subtle shifts in tone, posture, expression, and timing that reveal intentions, vulnerabilities, and unspoken opportunities invisible to ordinary perception. The mindset shift occurs when you begin reading these emotional signals as clearly as explicit statements, understanding motivations that remain completely hidden to conventional observation. The ultimate manifestation of these integrated disciplines emerges as you become what can only be described as an apex thinker, achieving a state of mental supremacy where ordinary limitations simply no longer apply. This represents the transformative pinnacle of cognitive development, where chaos becomes an ally rather than threat. Complexity transforms into a fascinating playground rather than overwhelming burden, and pressure becomes a tool for refinement rather than source of degradation. At this elevated state of cognitive functioning, you observe without emotional attachment, predict without hesitation, and move without revealing intention. Ordinary minds respond reactively to events, scrambling, panicking, and negotiating from positions of weakness. The apex thinker designs circumstances, bending probability toward advantage and shaping environments so outcomes align with strategy rather than chance. The journey culminates in a profound understanding that applied intelligence is the only path to becoming truly untouchable. Power that isn't exercised remains merely theoretical. Intelligence that isn't applied remains invisible. The transformation occurs when your thoughts become sharper than manipulation, faster than fear, and clearer than confusion, creating a mind that cannot be controlled, deceived, or compromised by external forces. If you're committed to transforming your mind into an unassailable strategic weapon, type "My mind is my fortress" in the comments below. The journey we've explored today isn't merely theoretical. It's a practical pathway toward mental sovereignty that begins with your very next decision. The cognitive edge conditioning system I've shared represents the distillation of centuries of strategic wisdom, from Machiavelli's penetrating insights to modern neuroscience's understanding of how our minds actually function under pressure. What separates those who merely survive from those who genuinely thrive isn't random chance or privileged circumstances. It's the deliberate development of a mind that operates at a fundamentally different level. A mind that remains clear when others become clouded, strategic when others become reactive, and composed when others become emotional. This transformation doesn't happen accidentally or overnight. It emerges through consistent application of the principles we've discussed, creating cognitive tension that builds neural strength, developing predictive thinking that positions you ahead of circumstances, cultivating mental agility that finds pathways where others see only obstacles, harnessing unpredictability that makes you impossible to manipulate, and mastering emotional intelligence that gives you unparalleled influence. If you found value in these insights and want to continue developing your strategic mind, subscribe to join our community of strategic thinkers. Each week, I share frameworks and practical techniques that build on these principles, creating an ever-expanding arsenal of cognitive tools you won't find anywhere else. Leave a comment with the phrase, "My mind is untouchable," if these ideas resonated with you. I personally read every comment and often develop future videos based on the questions and insights our community shares. If you appreciated this perspective on mental sovereignty, hit the like button. It helps more strategic thinkers discover this approach and expands our collective intelligence. There's a video right here that explores how to apply these principles specifically to high-pressure negotiations, where strategic thinking creates perhaps its most immediate and tangible advantages. Click and continue with me over there to see how these same cognitive frameworks can transform even the most challenging interpersonal dynamics into opportunities for strategic leverage.